Good evening, and to this Friday's edition of the Mackmyra Inn. Joining me, as always, is my fellow landlord, Rich and Micky. Good evening, Rich.
Good evening, Mick. Good evening, everyone joining us from home, fellow patrons.
And our VIP, our special guest VIP patron this evening is Hector MacLean of Jeffrey Street Whisky. Good evening, Hector.
Hello, good evening.
And how are you, my friend? Are you well?
Yep, fantastic. Still standing, still alive. Always good starts.
Definitely a class. What do you expect on a Friday, my man? Do you know what I mean? That's always good. Still standing on the Friday must have been, it couldn't have been too bad a week then.
If you keep your expectations low, you can be happy all the time, I think. Yeah.
Before the hangover hits on Sunday.
Definitely. So, a couple of bits of housekeeping before we get into it, guys and girls. So, obviously, last Wednesday, we launched our brand new spring seasonal for 2021, Bjork Sav or Birch Sap. Fantastic shot there. I believe that is from Whisky for Everybody. Absolutely great. Lovely. And obviously, we did our launch show last Wednesday as well, where we had a good couple of guests on, and it was really good. I really quite enjoyed it. Rich, what did you think?
Yeah, very good. And Angela turning up, she arrived a few minutes late. You and I had to tread water for 5, 10, 13 minutes or so, but I think we managed to do okay. And it was very grateful for when she turned up, and then we had the guests on. I think that was, if I do say so ourselves, speaking on behalf of everyone, I think that was, as far as launching a product goes, and that was quite a interesting way, a good way of doing it, having people come on and give their thoughts and things about it.
Yeah, it was. So, shows coming up. What shows have we got coming up, Rich?
24th of March. Next week, we've got a reserve cask show with Matt Chambers, our cask ambassador and keeper of the Quake, who's got a few guests coming on to talk about our 30-litre reserve cask programme. We don't have an inn next Friday because the Saturday is International Whisky Day. So instead of doing a Friday night, we're going to do, I think the rhyming slang for it's a Leo Sayer. So we'll do an all-day session on Saturday.
Maybe not quite the all-day, do you know what I mean?
A couple of hours.
Definitely a couple of hours in the afternoon, a few hours down the pub, as opposed to a Friday evening down the pub.
Mick, I think you're underestimating how much of a toll sort of daytime drinking is going to take on us all now. So it's going to be a couple of hours in the afternoon,
Yeah, from 3 till 5 could be a Leo. Depending on what it's like when we get out into the real world. So you could be spot on there, Rich. Really.
We've got Westland. So American single malt. From Seattle. So that's Chris Riesbeck, Stephen Randalls from Keurig Whisky, Irish Whisky, and Sheldon Almeida from Paul Chong coming to join us. So we'll say hello to everyone at the beginning, then we'll have one person at a time for 30, 40 minutes or so, and talk about world whisky and international whisky and all the things that come with it. Unless
we change it up, Rich, and just turn it into a Royal Rumble for the last half hour or something.
Yeah.
We'll see what it's going like. But before we hit out into everything, as we know, oh no, what's going on? Here we go. So there's the bell. So that's the landlord's bell for 18:05, 6:05. So that's mine and Rich's round. So Hector, what are you having this evening, sir?
I'm actually drinking, and my Swedish is appalling. The one that you're showing is Bjork stuff.
Yep, perfect.
Yeah, that's the first time I tried it, and always brilliant.
Awesome. Right, you get your nose into that, and we'll talk about it as we go on and stuff. Rich, what are you having this evening, sir?
I'm doing the same thing, and that wasn't planned at all. Just, I went for a walk this afternoon. I saw spring trying to come out. Flowers doing their best to appear, and a leaf or two knocking around. So I thought I was feeling very much in the spring season. So I thought it would suit me well to have this. So yeah, the Bjork Sav for me as well. So the one that you talked about at the beginning.
Nice. Like it. I like it though. So this evening, as always, I've gone for something from the cocktail shelf, if there's such a thing as the cocktail shelf, and I've gone for one of my own creations, which is just a twist on a Vesper Martini. Basically, I think I've had one of these before, but I quite like it. So all that's 3 parts Lab Gin, 1 part Grand Thé, last year's spring seasonal, and 1 part Lillet Blanc. and a couple of dashes of Angostura bitters. And yeah, it's strong. So take it easy when you drink one of these guys if you're going to mix one up, because it's all alcohol that goes into it, apart from the bitters, obviously. So it is quite a strong one. So drink reasonably. Don't tan about 15 of them before dinner, as you probably won't be able to taste your dinner or see it, in all fairness. So start the evening off. Go.
Fun.
Let's go.
Brilliant. So guys and girls, before we get to know Hector a little bit better, good evening to some regular flyers. We've got Tamara, so good evening, Tamara, and Shane. Hello. Guys, Tamara's on the Deanston Brandy cask finish. Beautiful. Lovely whiskey. So, ladies and gentlemen, please, if you're watching, if it's your first time, your 100th time, please let us know in the comments. Say good evening. Let us know what you're drinking. And while you're all doing that, Hector, well, just who the bloody hell are you? Introduce yourself, sir.
I'm a human being, professional alcoholic. I don't know what to describe myself. Whiskey fanatic, lover of all things that a cork can open. Is probably the best way to look at it. And
the occasional screw cap. And the occasional screw cap.
Yes, well, yeah, that too. Really, do we need a cork? It's a lot harder to open a cork, isn't it? So,
a lot more faff.
Yeah. I suppose also a little plug. Owner of Jeff Street Whiskey and Tobacco, also, but more the whiskey side. But a fanatic drinker of the stuff, and is one of the greatest gifts to mankind, in my opinion. It's whiskey. Can't beat it.
Wow, I mean that's quite the reputation for whiskey of all of all shapes and sizes to live up to, Hector. Really,
it's a brilliant thing. It really is. You can't really. I've always said, was how you describe it. It's the you can't really judge somebody until you've seen them drink a whiskey or alcohol, but a whiskey in particular. And also, it binds people. It's a sort of a friendship drink.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, without questionable doubt. Me and Rich, we say that in quite a lot of tastings as well. We enjoy doing it this way. It's fun. We're still working. We're getting to chat to people and meet some new people, which is lovely. But you can't beat, and we spoke about it just before we come on air, and you can't beat actually being in somebody's presence and getting their reactions and talking to them about the dram or the drink in hand, but especially like you're saying, the dram in hand,
And then being able to sort of judge people's expressions, like the first time somebody's drunk a cask strength whiskey, and the slight tear that comes out of your eye, but also it's a whole world of whiskey that I've not tried.
Yeah, especially if you've not warned them. Sorry, I forgot to tell you that might be a little bit stronger than you think.
Just after they've taken it. So, oh God, what was that?
Brilliant. So you mentioned you're the owner of Jeffrey Street Whiskey and Tobacco through in Edinburgh on Jeffrey Street, believe it or not. A couple of minutes walk away from Edinburgh Waverley, and a great new shop. So tell us about it.
Oh God, that's an embarrassing
what a gentlemanly shot. I like that. I like
that. From another time, also slightly rounder time. No, I don't know. I describe it basically. It's always been my ambition to have a shop of some sort, and when I got into whiskey, maybe a bit earlier than perhaps legally should have, but gloss over that. But I guess it's been an obsession of mine for a long time. It really sort of clicked, and I met my business partner Joanna, and actually working for another whiskey company, but I won't name names and what have you. But we realized that, it's that sort of thing of I love whiskey. She really loves whiskey as well, and so does her husband Daniel, my other business partner. And we thought, well, let's just do it ourselves. And we, decided that we'd find a location, we'd open up a shop, all a little bit shady to begin with. And then I would never go back. And it's my firm belief that absolutely everybody at some point should own a company of their own or run something themselves. Be your own boss and find something you love and make it your job. And in my case, it's whiskey, which sounds sad that alcohol should be my absolute love, but it's the best thing. And
we're not judgy people, Hector, are we, Rich?
No, nobody has ever judged me before, I hope. But yeah, and it became this idea, and I suppose the main idea we had really behind all of it was we'd sell things that we enjoy drinking, and that if you go to a lot of the other shops, which are all fantastic, they've got the whole range of all the whiskies, which people expect, but we sort of feel that if you come to us, it's sort of a bit like walking into somebody's. In fact, actually, like the rooms you're in right now, it's a whiskey collection, and we'll chat to you about all the things whiskey, but also that you should feel like you're walking into somebody's living room as opposed to walking into a clinical shop that sells alcohol, which does mean it's a little bit more dusty and what have you. But exciting. The tobacco came aside is sort of an inevitable. They pair very well. Not actually encourage anybody to smoke under any circumstances, and it's a terrible habit. Blah blah blah. But they do match up extremely well. So that was a sort of an offside. We also realised there aren't many tobacconists left in Scotland, so we combined them together. But it was whiskey was my real passion that I got into it, and I was thinking about the first whiskey that I fell in love with was Jura 16.
Oh, lovely.
The Jura Stone.
So that would have been the Storm, So that would have been from its pre new days, really.
Yes, yeah.
That's got his hands on it.
Slightly chubbier bottle that they had, and it was fantastic. And it was this moment of click. And I thought, this is it. This is what I want to get into. Be it writing about it, talking about it, selling it. I don't care what. This is what I'm going to do. And I made it happen, which I'm so pleased about. Wouldn't go back, although it is a marathon, an absolute marathon.
Yeah, for sure.
When was it that you set everything up? Sorry,
2014. So we've been at it for a while.
Yeah,
Still a long way to go.
And, what knowledge or interest did you have in cigars then beforehand? Is that something that you've learned more about since, or had you dabbled a bit before?
I sort of dabbled in it a fair bit, but with some knowledge, I could tell Cuban from A New World and what have you. And it became much more once we had a walk-in humidor and I can actually enjoy it. And it's that sort of thing of, if I probably didn't have them in the shop, I'd smoke them, but not in the quantity that I do. But it is the perfect pairing. But it's Daniel, who's Mexican. He was the tobacco side, and he really introduced me to the whole world of them. And they pair very, very well. A bit too well.
I mean, I do love coming through to the shop and just being able to take Daniel and stand in the walk-in humidor, but obviously before 2 meter rules and all that sort of malarkey, and standing, when you're probably allowed to go into your walk-in humidor, obviously now you can't do that.
Entry signs in it.
Because stuff cleaning that up, quite frankly. But just getting Daniel's passion on cigars and speaking to him in, what seems like a relatively small space, but bearing in mind it's a humidor that you stood in the middle of, which is just phenomenal for me. And just speaking to Daniel and his passion, it's like, speaking to you in the shop about the whiskies and stuff like that. You just get to know your guys' passions about stuff, and I love coming through to you guys. It's brilliant.
Very pleased. Mick, were you into cigars, or have you been into cigars for some time as well? Have you got?
Oh yeah. I'd say probably about 15 years or so. I've been enjoying the odd cigar from here. I started off as a pipe smoker. Look at me. I'm the archetype hipster, I suppose. They've got the beard.
You do look the type to have.
Exactly.
I mean, you're just missing your cravat, mate. In all
fairness. I know. I don't like ties. It chokes my neck. But a loose silk scarf, set you right off. The tweeds and all these things. But so I've enjoyed tobacco for a while. I've recently been getting into more of the healthier side, the nicotine snus pouches, which with Mackmyra Scandinavia is fantastic. But I have taken it in all its fashions. Quite a good pairing of whiskey is actually snuff.
Okay.
So it opens your nose up and you can get much more of a smell from it. So this has sort of become my snuff nostril. This is my whiskey nostril. So it's that sort of legal cocaine nostril, and and it's fantastic because you can pair, because snuff has such a universal flavor, and tobacco is a very sweet thing. Pairs perfectly with whiskey. Although the usual thing people find is that they don't necessarily want to go for the idea that everybody wants to. We'll go for a peated whiskey because tobacco's burnt. Worst thing you can do. And the peat overloads the tobacco flavors. You're best just to go for something a little bit sweeter and a little bit easier to smoke.
That is interesting, because I was always sort of labouring under the impression that people seem to smoke a cigar or enjoy a cigar and a whiskey at the same time. But I was told that it can kill the taste buds or the flavour or the experience of the whiskey. It can put a bit of it on. I suppose if you know which whiskey or what type of whiskey to pair with what type of tobacco product you might be enjoying with at the same time, I think that's probably key. And whoever I was speaking to just was advising on their own sort of, once or twice.
It would be true to, if you're drinking, to drink the majority of your whiskey before you have your cigar and then enjoy the last of it with it. As you rightly say, you can overload your taste buds somewhat, but the same so can the whiskey, depending on what you're drinking.
Yeah,
but,
yeah. So suppose if you start out a tasting with a big, heavy hitting number that's heavy on the oils and heavy on the peat and the smoke and stuff like that, and then you go like to then somewhere completely opposite end of the spectrum. So not to be name dropping or anything like that, but you go from like a really dark like Lagavulin and then hit out with like an Ocatosh and American Oak or something.
Yes.
And they're both fantastic whiskies in their place. But yeah, I suppose from a Mackmyra point of view, it's like hitting out with like a Svenska Amerikansk and then trying to hit into a Brooks.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? You're going to miss some of the. It's still going to probably taste quite nice, but you're going to miss some of the nuances in the lighter whiskey because you've had it second than you would have done from the big heavier whiskey,
There's something in there because when you're talking about the lineup of a whiskey there, if you're doing a tasting or you just got a flight at home for yourself or whatever it might be, you line them up in the order, lightest to heaviest for simplicity's sake. But I think if take that into account when you've got a cigar in the mix as well or two, then just work out what time and what interval you're going to have something else come into it. I suppose that if you've got that, I think it's that lack of structure or approach.
It can be a nightmare. Yeah. And I always find that trying to decide whether or not you put a very heavy cast strength at the end after the peated whiskey, or whether or not it's better to put the cast strength before the peated whiskey, but you can lose a lot of the flavour of the peated whiskey.
Yeah.
For instance, like a mild Kalila, I'd always have before the cast strength, even if it's peaty, because that will, or even actually the new Ardnamurcans. Beautiful light peat, very pleasant. But you don't want necessarily to have that after a 56 or a 62% whiskey, because you just lose all the nuances and all the flavors of it.
Because it takes people go, we'll put it before because it's lighter in flavor profile. Well, no, because that strength has a big effect on your taste buds and stuff like that as well.
Literally,
it's difficult and it makes your taste buds quite weary. To want of a better word, really.
A few years ago,
that's okay.
Yeah, so starting out, when I first got into whiskey, if somebody had put a line up in front of me or asked me to do something to line up, a tasting up, I'd have gone from cheapest to most expensive, or or just go up in age statements. I'd have ignored ABV, I'd have ignored cask types. I'd have just been very a very basic approach. But there's a lot of finesse that you need to consider.
There's a lot of skill in it. Although I've always found that the problem of the age statement is that there's this. I'm a firm believer that the age of the whiskey really, what's important isn't the main factor in it. So you can get some fantastic 5-year-olds that are, in some ways, just as good, if not better, than some 30-year-olds.
Amen, brother. Amen.
So by having an age gradient in your tasting, you can again completely destroy it by having a 30-year-old, a Glen Grant. Glen Grant, in my opinion, is a whiskey that is absolute fine under 10 years old. 10 and under for Glen Grant's brilliant. And if you get the chance, I think still in Italy, you can get some really decent 5-year-old Glen Grant across a supermarket table. Always go for flavor over age, and alcoholic strength should be the one that's lined up better, and a bit of smokiness always towards the end. And you do some complete lunatic tastings that'll start with an Octomore. What are you doing? But it's only 9 and 10 years old. But it's the super peat.
Yeah.
If you want to cause a PT Armageddon, give somebody an Octomore.
You can start with an Octomore if you're doing an Octomore tasting.
Yes, exactly.
Do a vertical Octomore tasting and start with the lightest peated to the heaviest peated.
Hector, we've had a question come in from Shilton who's joining us. Who I'm sure he said hello to you at the beginning. But he says here, what are your thoughts on whiskey infused cigars? And I'll start just quickly and just say I had no idea that they existed. So I'm very interested to hear what your answer is. Yeah.
In my opinion, and again, it's much like the whiskey. It doesn't matter how you drink whiskey as long as you're enjoying it. And the same thing with cigars. A lot of people turn their nose up at a heavily perfumed or an infused cigar, but in my opinion, they're just as good. You get some video on this. There's a great range called Vasco da Gama. And so if you buy a box, it doesn't come in a box. It comes in a barrel because they're all infused with rums and whiskey. I think actually it's Glenfarclas. They infuse it with Glenfarclas 10-year-old.
Nice.
And it's beautiful because you get the nice sweetness of the tobacco, almonds, and a slight pepper. And then it comes in with that nice sort of sherry, dry, apricot-y taste that you get from the whiskey. So they really pair very well, and it's a great way to go. And you do get a couple of things that, for instance, if you have a cigar that's not infused, you will find some will dunk their cigar in the alcohol to get the flavor. I personally feel that that's not quite there because you're not getting the flavor that was intended with the tobacco. However,
sorry, no, go on. Sorry.
No, carry on.
No, because obviously you see a lot of people like, films or whatever like that, and they've got their brandy and they dunk like the end of their cigar just before they light it up.
Mm-hmm.
Like the smoking end as opposed to the lighting end in the brandy and stuff like that. Do you know what I mean? To get that wee bit of flavour, and I think, well, it's probably going to dry out quite quickly, the brandy and the flavour, because it's not having time to think about like marinating chicken for a curry or something like that.
Yes,
it's not had time to sit in those flavours that you want it to take on before you then get to cooking it, essentially.
Or casks marrying together, Nick, as well. Back and casks together. Yeah.
It's just it's a power thing. The same way that often people will chop cigars a bit far down because in the movies they want to show off how powerful they are. If you just destroy your cigar when you do that.
Yeah.
Same thing, you don't want to show it off.
That's a lesson to me. I thought that's how one did it. You chop the end off and then light it up. Is that
so?
Not...
The cigars are rolled into tubes, and then they put what's called a tri cap on the top.
Yeah,
and there's a tiny little line around the very top, and then you want to shave just above that. So if you're cutting too far down, you not only do you lose a lot of tobacco, which you spent a fair bit of money on, but also you lose the whole thing can unravel. So you often find that the only thing holding it together then is the band. And depending where you are, for instance, in Britain, it's not the done thing to have the band on the cigar because you're enjoying it. Nobody else needs to know what you're smoking. So it's usually you take the band off before you start smoking. If you're in the US or in Canada, North America, then Mexico, then you leave it on because you want to show off what you're smoking. Same, the content will often remove it. So it's this sort of strange thing. You have all these different ideas, and same thing with whiskey. Every country has its own slight twist on how whiskey should be drunk and how it's enjoyed. And I feel that enjoy it, but don't break it.
Yeah. Well, I'm a band on kind of guy. Not for that particular reason, though. Not to show off what I'm smoking and not to hold my cigar together either, because I did learn probably out of trial and error and a bit of reading after. I thought, what's going on here? So you ask a few people a few questions and you read up a little bit and you go, why does my cigar fall apart after about 20 minutes?
Yep.
It's because you've cut about an inch off the bottom, mate. Do you know what I mean? You've handled it from the 18 when you bit the end off or something like that, and just completely ruined the integrity of your cigar. So what I learned was, you invest in a decent cutter. So I've got an elliptical cutter that cuts like a knife in the bottom, so it doesn't allow me to literally destroy the cap.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So if after a couple of drams and you're maybe not thinking straight and you want a cigar, as is sometimes the norm, you don't have to do a lot of thinking. You don't have to do a lot of thinking. Whereas if you have a guillotine cigar and it's literally as it suggests, a guillotine cutter, it's exactly as it suggests, you can get that wrong, can't you?
Oh, easily. And if as you say, you've had a few drams, then it's very easy to remove a finger if you're not careful.
There's that.
Oh yeah,
your own finger or somebody else's.
Well, I don't think we want to go to gangster territory.
Somebody else's. That's the gangster style. That's I'm the Don of Jeffrey Street, and I want to show you how it goes.
With no pig, you Mackmyra Inn bar bill. You get your finger up.
Pay your tab.
No, it's and there's so many different ways of cutting them and styles. It's like if you add ice to your whiskey, if you add water to your whiskey, and every style has a different flavor. Actually, the best example is cheese. Sounds strange, but if you grate cheese, it tastes completely different than if you eat cheese as a slice or if you've melted it into food. So if you cut your cigar on the end or if you put a plug in it, which are these little circular cutters, it tastes very different. Yeah. And my favorite's called a Cuban cut, where they imagine that's the cigar, that's the end. They'll shave the bottom down here. As you smoke, it moves the smoke across your palate. Same way that if you move the whiskey around your mouth, you're going to get that nice flavor around the cheek. Yeah. You drink it in a slightly different fashion, which I think is brilliant.
So how do you go about achieving that cut, Hector?
So you have these special boxes. Sorry,
Right.
the right camera, and they're like a one-armed bandit, and you stick your cigar on
I've seen them. I have seen them.
pull it down. Yeah, we got one by. Well, we had one by our till, so people wanted to cut it, but we noticed that people were putting their fingers in it, and you're thinking that has a razor sharp blade in it. We're not insured for this. Stop.
That's not the goal.
Yeah, insane. I was thinking one of the things that really drew me towards tobacco is got just as much rich history as whiskey does, and I'm a history fanatic, particularly when it comes to whiskey, but the tobacco side as well. You know how tobacco was first discovered, and the fact that if we had discovered it a different way, we might never have had it, which I think is genius. It's if you don't mind me telling the tale.
No, please do.
No, go on. Yeah, please.
So when the first colonists, or the first explorers reach North America, I think it's Columbus in particular, he travels down the continent and finds Cuba. And he lands on the island and he sends out his diplomats to go find the Great Khan of China, not realizing that, of course, he's not actually in China, so not the best photographer in the world. But I mean, and the locals aren't Chinese, they're not speaking Chinese. This is all very strange, but they do trade some goods in order to get scurvy. And as a gift, the local elder, the local tribe chief, gives them 2 baskets full of leaves, which they thought were ceremonial, and they just chucked them overboard. And that was tobacco. And then they sail off there and they land in eventually what's to become Haiti. And they send out the diplomats again, and they find that the locals have rolled them into a tube, which they called a cohiba, which is where the word cohiba comes from in tobacco. Okay. And they're smoking them, and the sailors and the diplomats say, well, fantastic, let me try. And they thought it was great. And then the strangest trade in history occurs. So they traded 3 red hats, Spanish-made red hats, for half a ton of tobacco leaf, which they load onto the 3 boats. And on the way back to Spain, it's really weird. The value of hats went through the ceiling. These things.
What and the hats? Do you know?
Nobody knows what they did with the hats.
Probably too much into it. Question.
Yeah, nobody knows what the locals did the hats on the leaf. And Columbus writes in his diary, because by the time he reached Spain, they'd smoked half of the leaf by the time they got back, which is a quarter of a ton of tobacco is a lot of tobacco. And he writes down in his sort of ledger that this is Satan's leaf. My crew are addicted to it, but Spain can make an empire from this. So, the sort of the nastiest colonialism comes in. And the really sad thing is that when it reached the shores of Spain, the sailors smoked, people in port smoked. The first man sort of observed smoking inland Spain was arrested by the Spanish Inquisition for being a demon. He was blowing smoke out his nose. He got arrested and sent to jail.
You wouldn't have seen it before, yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So this demon is blowing smoke out of his nose. This is outrageous. And he got arrested. And by the time he actually got out of his prison, out of his jail, everybody was smoking, so it's pretty unfair of them. And that's where you see all the different styles. So we didn't initially smoke in Europe. We ground it into powder and took it as snuff for your nose, because that was seen as more dainty. And if you're seen smoking in church, you're excommunicated. Taking snuff, that was different. In Russia, they actually banned smoking. If you're caught smoking once, you're whipped in public. If you're caught smoking a second time, you're actually killed. You're executed for it. Well, so if you're caught taking snuff once, then you're whipped in public. If you take it the second time, they merely removed your nose, which is much nicer. And you see this change in the tobacco culture and as it moves around. And I just love this sort of the tale of how, if we hadn't kept it, if the Spanish hadn't smoked it on the way back, probably just chucked it overboard again, thinking that's what it was. Now, the history of the planet completely changed. From that, Britain wouldn't have had an empire, or St. Jamestown would never have succeeded, and all these things. There's this big movement, and spice and tobacco and sugar.
That's fascinating. That's brand new information to me, all of that as well. That really is. Shilton there with another comment. He did ask another question actually as well. So just what's the average shelf life of a cigar in a humidifier?
So, in a humidifier, which is properly maintained and humidified at about 65 degrees humidity to 72 degrees humidity, it will last for decades, centuries. Like wine, cigars improve with time and aging.
Does temperature have a part to play in that as well?
Where possible, 18 degrees Celsius, which is now impossible in Scotland. So as warm as you can get it and as humidified as you can keep it. If it falls down too far, it becomes to powder. If it goes too far, your cigar will literally burst as you smoke it. So they're very, very delicate things, but they do improve with time and age. So I'd say 20 years. And then there is a book, if you have a spare £600, written called Post.
Who doesn't?
Past year.
Who doesn't have a £600?
Mick, to be fair, if you just didn't buy a few bottles of whiskey for just a handful of weeks, you could probably buy that book.
It's a heavy read. It's about that thick. It's the Bible of tobacco.
Wow.
And this chap from Hong Kong realized one day that he's just going to get into cigars, and he wrote this book. And he goes down to almost the hour that you should smoke each Cuban tobacco. So an Oil de Monterey Epicure number 2, you should wait 3 years, 2 months, 1 week, and 2 days. And that's absolute best, and then you should smoke it.
Very specific, that isn't it?
So every cigar has its perfect thing, much as every distillery has, that perfect age bracket.
Yeah.
It's quite amazing.
No, that's awesome. That's awesome. Let's cover a couple of comments from some of the guys. Kevin Blair's tempted by the Little Brown Hund. Look at Kev, take the plunge. It's brilliant. So just to give everybody a Little Brown Hund. I've got a bottle. Actually, Rich, have you got yours there?
I might make that my second drink, Mick.
Could be a good shout, Rich. Could be a good shout. Yeah. So that was released by Little Brown Dog. So in Swedish, Little Brown Dog is Little Brown Hund. And it's a single cask 12-year-old Mackmyra.
Excuse
me. Single cask 12-year-old Mackmyra from Virgin American Oak casks. Oof. And it comes in at 48.9%. And that's cash strength.
Other way around. 49.8. Yeah.
60.3%. But here in your eyeballs.
Yeah.
That's good stuff.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive. So who else have we got? So obviously Shilton's just singing your praises, mate. I think we're going to get a few more questions from Shilton as we go on through.
Shilton's looking at his humidifier at home right now, and he's sizing things up. He's working things out.
Doing an Excel spreadsheet of
that's it.
In the humidor at what time and how long you should leave it in for, and set alarms for
different layers in the cigars.
Yeah. Set your alarm to come out.
Oh, I was about to say we had I think Paul Ryan joined us last night actually for our monthly tasting. I'm sure.
Awesome.
I got on the whiskey tonight. Mackmyra, probably Mac. Which mixer do you suggest? I think Mick, I'll pass that question to you. Like you said last night, usually Scotch or Irish, but which he has with dry ginger or just over ice. What do you suggest to someone new to Mackmyra, Mick, for a Mac?
So there's Marks and Spencer's. I don't know if other supermarkets are available that do this, but they do a pear and apple sparkling juice. That is fantastic with the Mac. And just a slice of like Granny Smith apple or any other like sort of sharp apple that you get with it. Just a slice of that as your garnish. Over ice in a highball. Fantastic. Absolutely fantastic.
So nip out to the shop, Paul, and go and grab that. But pop us on YouTube on your phone. Put your headphones in, maybe. And a
more available one that might be available in the shop just up the road from you. Something like that would probably be like Appletiser or something along those sort of lines. Do you know what I mean? It hasn't quite got that pear influence, but something fizzy, but with that orchard fruit in it is spot on for Mac.
Appletiser. Shane, our boss Shane said to us to put Appletiser with Brooks some time ago. And that was absolutely excellent. It sounded bizarre to me, but that was delicious. So yeah, with Mac, I can see that going well.
The orchard fruit from like Appletiser and those sort of juices goes really well with Mac, with Brooks, with Spencer Geck to a certain degree in that as well, because of our new make Spirit Rich, because of those fruitiness, the fruit tones that we get in our new make. It works really quite well from our DNA perspective. But let's Hector, what are your thoughts initially on the Bjorksav?
It's phenomenal. You're just talking about apples, and it does taste like Granny Smith apples.
Oh,
if you peel them, it's the smell of the freshly peeled apple skin. It's phenomenal. And I don't know how Mackmyra manages it. Every whiskey you produce is just it's exceptional. Was it the green tea? I can't get enough of it.
Isn't it?
Yeah. Oh, yes. Yeah. And it's the thing I love the most about the fact that it's in Sweden and therefore doesn't have to comply with Scotch rules. You can experiment with just about anything, and it's brilliant. And I feel that the more world whiskies which can experiment, the better. Because whilst it's important to have the rules of Scotch and that whiskey in Scotland should be produced in such a fashion, it does kind of impede innovation.
Yeah.
So by having these distillers which are willing to innovate, even if it doesn't necessarily go completely right, which seems to always go right for Mackmyra, that in itself is just brilliant.
It just makes the whole category stronger. I think Dave Broom, if you've ever read The Way of Whiskey, where he goes, to Japan and studies not just Japanese whiskey making, but parts of culture and things, and how that's influenced the way they make whiskey and everything as well.
Exactly.
And he talks about the need for innovation to keep things going. So I think he talks a little bit, references the Japanese tea ceremony, which has not changed in centuries at all, but I don't know, excitement around it, or the amount of people that actually do it and don't just go somewhere to watch it happening, pay a ticket to turn up somewhere. It's slowly dying out because they haven't adapted it or changed it at all. And I'm not saying that they should, or that people shouldn't stick to the tradition if they've got something and some heritage there, but you have to have some innovation in the area that you're working in to allow it to grow, to bring more people in, just to see what else can happen and some change. So
absolutely,
it's exciting for us to be able to do that sort of thing. Yeah,
and it's the fact that also, because it's produced in a different location, you have all the flavors, and perhaps the greatest strength of whiskey is the fact that it tastes like where it's from. Scotch whiskey should taste like you're in a glen in Scotland, or a lowland whiskey tastes like you're wandering around the borders. And an Islay whiskey tastes like you're being hit in the face by the ocean. It's that sort of idea, which is great. Like the Paul John in India, in Goa, it tastes how I would imagine like an Indian whiskey should taste. It's that sort of thing. It tastes Indian, which I think is brilliant. And Mackmyra tastes Swedish, and you get that culture, as you say, the cultural influence within it.
Sense of place for me.
Different locations, different bacteria in the water. It's all fantastic.
So I didn't mean to jump in there, beg your pardon, but a sense of place for me is that you derive from these different types of whiskies and the place that you're talking about. So without going down the rabbit hole of terroir and things, but provenance, just a sense of place of that's something that I buy into completely.
For me, provenance is such a better word to describe it than terroir. Now, don't get me wrong, right? And I don't want to go down, like you said, Rich.
We're going down it, Nick.
But just a quick 2 seconds on it, right? Yes, some distilleries are set up to produce terroir-inspired or terroir-influenced whiskies. Yes, there are, but they are very, very much the minority of the minority, not the general overall consensus. That's all I'm going to say on that.
Yeah, okay. And the provenance in the end is better because it's the person who made it. Where they came from is their influences that come into it. Yeah. Because you're boiling away, if I get into this, you say that you're boiling away a lot of the terroir when you're producing whiskey. It is the person. You can almost tell when it's a different distiller.
Yeah,
that particular barrel was made by a different master distiller than this one, and as such, the whiskey will taste different because they have different ideas, the cutting points, and that's the art of whiskey. It's the personal feel of whiskey, which I feel so important. It's just the best thing.
Yeah, definitely.
It's kind of. So I suppose wine is man and earth attached. Whiskey is man and industry attached. It's the man and liquid. The chemistry that goes into it is entirely man-made. There's not that nature behind it. So you've brought away nature. You've brought in human ingenuity, which I think is just brilliant.
Yeah,
it's nothing quite like it.
Yeah, so we've got a few more comments coming in. So Kim Battistini. Sorry if I pronounced that wrong, Kim. I do apologise. She's going for a mixed special tonight. Your cocktail with the Vintegler, the creme de menthe, and the ginger ale, lovely. Yeah, I did that. That was last week, and I just garnished that with some frozen blackberries that I picked from the garden in the summer, and a nice big sprig of mint. So happy you're taking this on board, Kim. I'm glad you're enjoying it. Shilton, I love Shilton. Shilton loves the Svensk the best cigar pairing options with that dram. So obviously the Svensk is our peated dram. So obviously going back to he's apologising to our boss.
Shane love it. Shane absolutely love it. Shilton, far away.
Get on with it. So yeah. So a lightly peated dram. What would you reckon would be the best cigar to go with that?
So you want to go New World. So anywhere that isn't Cuba. Nicaragua in particular, something with Steli. Probably I go with Padron. The 2000 Natural, if you can get a hold of them. It's if you're, how do you describe it? It's digestive biscuits, light cocoa, and this coffee-like taste that comes behind it. The coffee will bring out a little bit more of the smokiness. The chocolate brings out the sweetness, natural sweetness and beat. And the earthiness of Nicaraguan tobacco would sort of bring out a little bit more of the spirit nature of Mackmyra.
Nice.
And couldn't be better, actually. So yeah, but Padron 2000 natural. Avoid the Maduro. That one it's like eating a bar of 90% cocoa. Or if you take a spoonful of cocoa powder, blows your taste buds out. But a nice Padron or an AJ Fernandez of some fashion would be just perfect. Last call, natural minty flavor.
So just from, because obviously I quite like my cigars and that as well. So Maduro, what does that mean? Is that just sort of like sun dried? Is it or
no? So Maduro, if I remember rightly, means dark in Spanish.
Right.
My Spanish is even worse than my English, which is already pretty appalling. And so they tend to have a darker leaf. It's been matured or cured for much longer than the standard natural tobaccos will have been. It actually takes about 3 years to cure a leaf for a cigar, so it takes a long time to produce the Maduro. And the instant thought people see as a darker cigar, it's going to be more powerful, but it's actually usually the opposite. So it'll have a more intense, rich flavor, but it won't blow your head off. So you actually get lower nicotine content from a Maduro than you will from a natural cigar. But you tend to find New Worlds will have a lot of Maduros and darker leaves. Cuba does, I think, only about 3 Maduro leaf cigars, maybe 4 or 5. Just not their style. But you want to avoid Maduros when you're drinking whiskey, because the richness in the cigar will overload the natural richness in whiskey. It's always better to go for a natural leaf, sun-growing or shade-growing leaf for pairing whiskey. For something like Maduro, you want to go down the brandy route, what have you. Although, that being said, if you're mixing a whiskey with ginger, then a Maduro would work really well. I'm a huge fan of, I can't think of a better mixer really than ginger ale or ginger beer. The spiciness is the best.
I wish I'd been writing that down, all of that. I was listening to that so intently, I was just thinking, I must remember this. So my experience is the opposite to Mick. So I smoked successfully a cigar for the first time without turning green and inhaling and becoming ill. Only a little over a year ago. So when I started with Mackmyra, I think anyone that's joined us watching before would have heard me talking about the fact that I only managed to leave my house, I think fewer than half a dozen times, to be an ambassador before lockdown came in, and I've been an ambassador since. But three of those outings were to Havana House, if you're aware of those.
Yeah, fantastic place.
Yeah, so the first one was when I was sort of shadowing our colleague, Matthew Davey, while he hosted a whiskey and cigar pairing in a smoking room at the back of one of their shops in Windsor. The second time I went back there to go and train a few members of staff on our brand. And then the third one was I went to Brighton, and the day was cancelled. The staff training day was cancelled because COVID was sort of creeping in, and people weren't too keen on it then. So, but the whiskey and cigar night was I think it must have been my first or second, perhaps, or third. It was my third outing, and I was terrified of being in a room with all these people that were smoking cigars and obviously knew what they were about. They were members of a club, and when I was there and we were getting warmed up for everything, they'd said how many times they'd been there before, and they were discussing all of these, to me, that sounded very technical things, whooshing over my head. But I said up front, rather than pretend that and just try and smoke a cigar and end up looking like an absolute fool. I said, look, I've never been able to do it successfully before. I've never inhaled something without going into my lungs, so I don't know how to do something without.
It's so counterintuitive.
So anyway, so they were very kind, they were very patient with me, and we had 2 cigars that evening. Everyone finished their second cigar, and I was 2/3 of the way down my first. So I was, I wasn't keeping up the pace, but I was able to do it and still, not turn green and everything. But
sounds like probably smoking a cigar better than most. Take your time with the cigar.
Yeah, it was that, and I took my but they did give me the second cigar to take away with me. And you're talking about humidifiers and things. Obviously, I don't have one here, so it was, if I hadn't smoked it, the next day, it's basically it's a memento now. It's in a little case that they gave it to me in. It's in a drawer in the next room. It's I'll never be able to smoke it, but until it entropy comes in, it disintegrates. I'll just have it as a memento of my early days of Mackmyra.
You can rejuvenate it.
I was just about to ask.
Do I dip it in whiskey and just leave it in there for a bit to marinate, to marry?
If only.
Yeah.
It sounds ridiculous, but if you're going for a shower or a bath, bring it into like a Ziploc bag. Open the Ziploc bag, leave it on the counter or in your what's the word? A sink, and have a shower. Don't use any fragrant soaps, and then the natural humidity will rejuvenate it. You can do that once. It won't be at the high quality it would have been before, but it does work.
That is brilliant. Yeah.
What about putting him with like something like a 69% or a 72% Boveda?
That's absolutely much better if you have one. But the Boveda pouches are great because they maintain humidity and that can rejuvenate it. But if the cigar is dried out, you can bring it back once and then it'll be done.
So, seems a bag idea, Rich. Seems a bag idea, but you can get like Boveda packs. The guys at Jeffrey Street, you do them, don't you?
You would do, yep.
Okay,
yep.
Yeah.
So they do them. Literally, it's moisture in a bag. So think of a desiccant bag that you'd get, but in reverse. Right?
Okay. Yeah,
it's literally in reverse. It's to put the humidity in, not take it out. So you put that Ziploc bag and then leave that for however long.
Yeah, I mean, if you're rejuvenating a cigar, 24 hours is best. If you're using Boveda, rejuvenation.
If I was to do it in the shower, which is something I could turn around and do some. How long would I? Because I'm not in the shower for 24 hours. So so as much as I'd like to be, the bath or something. Things to do.
No more than about 15 minutes.
Okay.
15, 20 minutes, and your cigar should be good to go. You had to smoke it within 24 hours, though. So do it prior to whatever party you're having.
This is such fantastic news for me because I was gutted about having finally managed to crack being able to smoke a cigar, and I thought, right, I'll have that, and I just didn't get around to it for a few days, and I thought, it's going to be a souvenir. That now, I think when lockdown ends, and I'll perhaps do that to sort of mark that occasion, or when I manage to get a jab and I'm
going to get my mask framed and put it on the wall. So remember 2020.
Yeah, but with all the sweat marks in there.
Yeah, exactly. Problem is, if you open it up, might unleash some sort of plague again.
Yeah.
Oh no, yeah.
Do that. So we've had a few more questions come in, which are fantastic as well. So shouting again, no surprise. So Stalker shouting this evening. If you had to pick one Mackmyra and one cigar, what would it be?
Ooh. Well, one of my favourite Mackmyras is pronounce it again. Is it Wintersol?
Wintersol, yeah.
Which is that the one with the berries?
It's port Wintersol.
Port, yes, yeah. And that's with if you can get a hold of them. There's a Turfanti Opus X. They cost an arm and a leg, but if you get a hold of it, I think Britain gets a maximum 20 boxes per 3 years sort of style. Wow. It's insane how rare these cigars are. But that would be my absolute perfect pairing with a Mackmyra. That, although for something a little bit easier to get hold of, would be the Mac, which for tasting basically like banoffee pie in a bottle, one of the best things in the world. And that paired with something actually relatively big, a Monte Cristo No. 4 with the Mac, you can't beat it. You get the richness of the cigar, the sweetness of the banoffee pie. Actually the best way to look at it is a banoffee pie with a toffee drizzle on top of it.
Yeah,
it couldn't be better. It's absolutely fair.
An easy to get hold of whiskey that's not going to break the bank. With an easy to get hold of cigar that's not very expensive for a cigar either. So.
Not at all. Yep, and it's just it couldn't be a better pairing. Really very delicious.
Awesome. I think we've got quite a subjective question from Nick Gascoigne. I'm confident I know the answer to it, but we'll let you answer it, Hector. How much of a cigar to smoke before it gets heavy or bitter? Is it different for different cigars?
So there's a technique. So the problem, if your cigar is getting very bitter and heavy, you're smoking a bit too quickly. So the aim is to have a puff about once every 2 minutes or so. If you're smoking very quickly, then you start to boil the tar, which then affects the leaf, which you don't want to have, particularly for cigars, because that will really start to mess up your insides. But rule of thumb, if you're not intending to what's called nub your cigar, but you smoke it right down to the very bottom, then to the label tends to be the sort of the mark point where your cigar will start to become a little bit more acrid, a little bit more nasty.
2 seconds, just to cut in there. And you said earlier, and I said I was a band keeper honor. For that reason, I tend to smoke down to my band, and that's when it will roughly then either, I'm actually still quite enjoying it, so I'll move my band back a little bit more.
So you're actually puffing on cardboard rather than cigar.
Yeah.
The trick is where you feel naturally holding it with your finger tends to be the best place to reach the end of a cigar. Cubans tend to last a little bit longer. New Worlds have very powerful flavors, so you want to smoke that down to 2/3. It tends to be the best way. There are some cigars, such as the Nut by Oliva, which you can smoke right down until you're burning your fingers, which does happen. They are delicious.
I mean, they come in that smaller size, don't they? So like a nub is a size like a Churchill or whatever. It's actually like a recognised size now.
Not necessarily recognised by other companies, but they've developed this idea that their blends be perfect for those particular blends, and the idea being that you could nub every cigar that they produce, which is very true. Their Maduro blend, or in fact their Cameroon blend. The number of times I've ended up with blisters on my fingers from having smoked them right down.
Oh, really?
It's but yeah, I'd say that's to the beginning of the band, or the middle point of the band tends to be the point where cigars become a bit acrid. If you find you start to get the flavor change a bit, so it starts to become very heavy, tastes a little bit chemically, just leave your cigar for a few minutes. And that also has the added effect of what's called delayed gratification, which is such a weird thing, but it's how the human brain works. One of the best things you can do is light your cigar, smell the cigar for a minute, pop it in your ashtray, and then have a drink or go make a coffee, and then come back to it. By that time, your brain's gone, oh, wow, that smelled brilliant, that tasted brilliant. And when you take a puff, it tastes infinitely better. So the same thing with whiskey. If you take a smell of your whiskey and then drink it, take a little sip, and then leave it for a few minutes, and then come back to it, the flavor's infinitely more intense.
Yeah,
and tasty because you've had time to exactly.
Interesting. Mick, how are you at delaying gratification? Because I am useless.
That's a question for a whole new evening.
Yep. The problem, I'm a very efficient collector of empty bottles. I was saying before we started, my collection, I had to send it up to the Highlands because I've drunk so much of it. I can't. It's at risk.
Yeah. Well, I had a couple of guys posted on a Facebook page for Glasgow bartenders the other day saying they'd started a candle making company, basically reusing bottles to make candles from. Now, I did this a while back, but I've been too busy to carry on doing it. So this is obviously because pubs are closed, our normal revenue of bottles is shut off. So I sent them a message and said, guys, I've got one or two.
It's probably you have to get pick up from the council.
You come and take off my hands, and they were like, "Yeah." So he come down, and he was expecting like a box. And you're thinking I was over exaggerating. No, the big naked wines boxes.
Mm-hmm.
Each of those slots, I think there's about 15 or 16 slots per box, had at least 2 bottles in. And they took away 3 of those boxes.
And you hand it over and you have to apologise that you're not an alcoholic.
Yeah.
You're an alcohol trainer.
For a really long time. There you go. Shilton's lobbying. I think we need to. We'll talk offline about this. But
I don't know. I was going to put
okay.
everyone on the spot and just say, a 2-part question for you. Have you done any like virtual tastings for cigars over lockdown? And the follow-up would be, would you want to do something with us? Shilton's idea. I'm just, don't shoot the message. Nah.
We haven't, but it would be something quite actually it'd be worth it because you can smoke in your own house. Well, one of the problems we find with doing cigar events, particularly in Scotland, is in 2006, Scotland branded all tobacco to be identical. So the smoking ban was completely across the board. In England, on the other hand, they decided that cigars were quite a luxury item. So you still have smoking lounges of the historical and the option to smoke indoors.
Like private members club type stuff, you can still smoke on them in England. But in Scotland, you just wiped it out across the board.
Tobacco's tobacco, right across the board.
I learned that there was a discrepancy in what was happening when I mentioned that one of my first ever shifts was going into the smoking room of a cigar shop for a whiskey. I had no idea whatsoever that they were still allowed to do it because I don't buy cigars. I wasn't smoking
it's
them.
Absolute culture. But it can be a bit tricky to do those things. But if people are in their own homes, then absolutely, I'd be very happy to do a whiskey and cigar pairing. I love it. We have done it in the past. outdoors. There's a couple of very good venues in Edinburgh that do allow outdoor smoking with whiskey tastings. So if you are based in Edinburgh, if you get the chance to visit, then the Glass House, top of the Omni Centre, which is this hidden gem. They converted, when they built the Omni Centre, they converted the old church next door into a hotel, and they've got an acre's worth of rooftop gardens that nobody knows about.
A whole acre. That's massive.
It's huge.
That is massive.
The whole block is this rooftop garden, and you go in and say, "I'd like to go to the Whisky Lounge," and they'll take you up to the Whisky Lounge, in which they have a very good selection. And it's quiet, private, and you're thinking you're in the city centre. There's construction going on across the road, and you hear none of it. So that's very, very good. And there's always the Hotel Divan. They've got their smoking bothies, and the Place Hotel, which is not advised to go into every place in York Place and say, "Is this the place?" Because they say it's our place, get out, sort of style. But they've also got a fantastic area. So we have done previous events in these locations. But more than happy to do a whiskey and cigar pairing.
Let's talk after, because I mean, we've got one customer already in Shilton, ready to go. Yeah. So,
I think before we start to wrap up and get to last orders, Nick's asked the last question there. Can you match different cigars with different foods? Can you choose a cigar based on the meal that you've eaten, as opposed to have it with it? Because so obviously a meal and then as a a post digestive.
I suppose you have the best thing if you're pairing cigars with food is to eat first and have the cigar afterwards, because the food will overload.
Not during.
Well, you could, but it's a bit tricky. But you've got a glass of wine and food.
Depends on the restaurant.
You do 3 hands. But it's the best thing for cigars is, if you're vegetarian, I apologize, but it's is game meat. Hare, jugged hare actually is fantastic. Pheasant, partridge. So this
quite rich, gamey flavors. Yeah.
Those sort of strange upper class foods. But if you're vegetarian, then something really, really rich. A ragu with aubergines, courgettes, rich tomato sauces. Beans are also quite a good call. They bring a lot of flavour into it. Nothing spicy. Spice foods.
Well, because that's going to blind your palate again, like we spoke about.
It obliterates it. You'll lose all the flavour that you have from this cigar. Best enjoy cigars for after meals. Cohibas are always a good call, and they're quite rich from Partagas. Nice peppers, gingers. The best food to have with the cigar is the pudding. So have your main course, and then if you have a pudding afterwards, have your cigar with the pudding, with coffee. Caffeine enhances the flavour of nicotine and tobacco-related products. So you'd want to go for something quite coffee-like. Creme brulee is always a good call. And oats.
I'm a big tiramisu fan.
Oh,
just thinking
perfect. Couldn't be better.
Yeah.
Yep. But again, I shouldn't be. I'm going to anyway. One of the best foods to have with a cigar is Sunday breakfast, porridge, and instead of cream, a dram of whiskey. So like a makeshift. What's the word? A makeshift Cranachan.
Nice.
With that also a nice cigar, and your taste buds haven't been overloaded by the day. So the best time, in my opinion, actually to sample a whiskey is just after you've had breakfast, porridges and cereals, because your taste buds haven't been onslaughted by other flavors, which is also one of the best times when reps come into the shop and bring with them their drams. It's usually relatively early in the day, which is very useful because you haven't had lunch yet, you haven't influenced your flavors, and you can really get an idea of what's going drunk there, which is where myself and my business partners disagree. They have a spittoon. I can't feel you can actually taste a whiskey until you swallow it. So after that, so these things. But in the morning for a good cigar with your breakfast, or in the evening after a pudding, is the best thing to go. Avoiding anything cold. Ice cream, don't do it.
Again, the same thing that ice does to your whiskey. It's going to mute your flavours, isn't it? So your ice cream is going to draw back your taste buds, essentially, isn't it, really?
Yeah, it's like getting into a bath full of ice. Your taste buds go, woof, and you don't get any flavour or taste.
No, stuff that. No, that's been some fantastic information this evening. So that brings us to, unfortunately, ladies and gentlemen, I know where has that hour gone? I don't know. Hour, quite frankly. But unfortunately, that is last orders. That's our licensing laws. as archaic as they are currently. And that's last order. So that brings us on to the whiskey scenario question, Hector. So basically, the whiskey scenario question is, what's in the glass? Where are you? And who are you with, if anybody?
Well, one of my favorite things when it comes to sort of whiskey scenarios is drinking whiskey with my father, who doesn't often drink alcohol in general. And it's going to sound a bit terrible what's in the glass, but he is a fanatic drinker of famous grouse. And I really, really enjoy just sitting and chatting about inevitable family history, you know, who killed who and what day and all this sort of stuff. But with
like last week or something.
Yeah, exactly. As long as it's not me, it's fine. Yeah. With a dram of famous grouse, which I really enjoy, or Black Bottle, which is one of my all-time favorite whiskies. Brilliant. But I'd say with family, a decent whiskey, be it a blend or a single malt. Single malt wise, I'm a sucker for peated whiskey. Although my absolute all-time favorite whiskey, and to plug another company, but you know what have you, it Springbank 15. Love it. It's always on my desk here for reasons. And with friends. Yeah, exactly. With friends, with family, and once all this hell of pandemic and lockdown's over, that'll be the first thing I do. Get together with some friends who drink whiskey or who don't drink whiskey, but in particular those who drink whiskey, and I have a dram of Springbank or a nice camp time, Glen Scotia, a double cask or something along those lines. Just
if it's going to be against Scotia, for me it would have to be Victoriana.
Yeah, Victoriana is brilliant. Yeah, absolutely fantastic stuff.
I've got mine up there. Up the top. Yeah.
Oh, jealous.
I actually need a new bottle of it, but
well, we have many bottles in the shop. Just but yeah, with friends and family is the best time to drink whiskey, and to be in a good mood and a good jovial mood with everybody. It's the best thing.
Absolutely fantastic, Hector. Our comments are going to reflect what the comments in the chat. Absolutely been a pleasure to have you this evening, my friend. It's been an absolute journey and an education, but in a really fun way, like we like to do. Anyway, you know, Chilton's over the moon. He's going to probably hit Jeffrey Street Whiskey for about 1,500 cigars now. Mackmyra is a frequent flyer, and she's also a Mackmyra brand ambassador in Cologne in Germany. An hour ago, she knew absolutely nothing about cigars. So thank you very much, Hector. Great listening to you, and thanks for sharing your knowledge with so much passion. I think that pretty much sums the evening up, ladies and gentlemen. Do you know what I mean? So, Hector, over to you. Give us your final thoughts. Any shout outs you want to do? Anything you got coming up for Jeffrey Street? Actually,
we're doing virtual tastings. So if you suddenly find that you want a virtual tasting, not to take away from Mackmyra's virtual tastings, but shout out wise, not much, but it's been an absolute pleasure. I mean, I've loved it.
You do have an international pack, though, don't you?
We do. 5 whiskies, 5 doubles. Yeah. There we go. That's going into it. And I think we're also going to put in the Just Hatched from Cardrona.
Oh, beautiful.
I'll just jump in quickly. I saw the Canya there. I tried that with Shilton, and he and I are part of the same local whiskey club, the Berkshire Whiskey Club. We're not too far down the road from one another. That Canya is absolutely fantastic.
One of the best. I love Paul John. Can't beat it.
Unbelievable.
Yeah, the shout wise, but other than that, it's been absolutely fantastic. I've really enjoyed it. Thanks for having me along.
Honestly, mate, it's our complete pleasure. Rich, what have we got until next Wednesday? Is it Wednesday?
Yeah, Wednesday. Well, the 24th, I can remember that. You've remembered Wednesday, so let's say that's what it is, but it's definitely the 24th. We've got our reserve cast shows. Anyone join on YouTube, Facebook. If you look at mackmyra.co.uk, you'll be able to see our schedule for things we've got coming up. But our show, Matt Chambers, our cask ambassador, has got a few guests coming on to talk about casks. And then next Friday, we don't have an in. So here's Matt Chambers here. Some people might recognise him from his reviews on his allotment. So Whiskey with Everyone being his social media handle, but his blog and things as well. So and then next Friday we don't have an in because we're doing our all day, more or less, or all portion of the afternoon session, 3 p.m. until 5 p.m. next Saturday. So we've got an international festival, bonanza of brands coming together. So Westland American Single Malt, what they do over there is just it's fascinating. The level of technical knowledge that Chris, who we have here on the left, is going to impart on everyone it's insane. I've got Stephen Randalls as well with from Keurig Whisky, who have got their seaweed cask whiskey, with which a bottle arrived with me yesterday, where they burn seaweed inside of an oak cask to infuse the flavors into the wood. It's very innovative. We're talking about innovation and creativity in the industry, how important it is. They're doing some brilliant things there, really forward-thinking stuff. And then Paul John in Shilton, who we've had join us this evening, and what can be said? We've all high praise for the whiskey, for Shilton himself as well. So so it's going to be a good Saturday, Mick. And then I think you and I have got tastings that host the evening. So hopefully we're still standing at the end of it, and we'll be okay. Yeah, but that's it. I think they're the two big things we've got coming up next. Yeah.
Certainly is. So we shall wrap it up there. So, ladies and gentlemen, once again, thank you very much for joining us. It wouldn't be the Mackmyra Inn without your input. Again, Hector, thank you very much, sir, and I shall see you in person soon. And Rich, good night. God bless, and good night, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us.
Cheers.
Go on.
Sanj.